This is Israeli Technology Founders Speak, a podcast of conversations with successful Israeli high-tech and biotech entrepreneurs. With your host, Avraham Hermon. Gill is the CEO of Aion Labs, whose mission is to revolutionize pharmaceutical drug discovery and development by harnessing the power of AI and cutting-edge technology. They empower visionary scientist founders and entrepreneurs through deep collaboration with global pharmaceutical leaders, accelerating the creation and validation of transformative biotech solutions. Avraham sat down with Mati in the offices of Aion Labs to discuss how Aion Labs is bringing together scientists and entrepreneurs in large pharmaceutical companies, the unique role that Aion Labs serves in the Israeli ecosphere, tips for startup founders, and much more. This podcast is a creation of J.M.B. Davis Ben David, an intellectual property law firm serving clients around the world. You have great innovations. We keep them safe. It's not enough to just have a great startup idea or innovation. If you don't legally protect your innovations, products, and brand, anyone can claim them as their own. We keep your great innovation secure. Learn more by going to jmbdavis.com. That's jmbdavis.com.
I'm in Rehovot at Aion Labs with Mati Gill, sitting in the offices of Aion Labs looking out over Rehovot. Let's talk a little bit about Aion Labs and especially about what need Aion Labs fills.
So Aion Labs was built and started to operate around 3.5 years ago and really is addressing three unmet needs at the same time with a very core mission. Number one is to bring in drug discovery and development, and to bring into those processes computational technologies, AI, machine learning, and any other type of computational technology to really accelerate that process, which now is a very, I would say, inefficient process, right? Because we all know how much it costs, close to $2 billion, well over 10 years, and particularly that it's an over 90% failure rate.
Just to give a little bit of background for our listeners, Mati and I go way back to Teva, Israel's leading pharmaceutical company. We were both in the legal department there in Teva.
Correct, but I think we spent more time running together the hills of Jerusalem in marathons than we did actually in the legal department of Teva.
Yeah, so that common interest of running remains, and I'm glad to see you're still at it. It's a long process. It's an expensive process. It's an unsure process. And you're saying introduce all sorts of elements of AI and computation, correct? To be able to make that process easier,
more predictable, as well as more cost efficient. And in addition, we want to do so by building great startups. And the unmet need that we're addressing here in Israel is that we feel that there's an untapped potential to have a strong biotech ecosystem in Israel. And really, with the exception of Teva Pharmaceuticals, we don't have a big success story that's been built in Israel in the biotech space. And that's something that we're trying to address here at Aion Labs. And we feel that there's potential to do so because over the last 5-7 years, we've seen a whole cluster of companies grow in the computational biology space that are raising good rounds, advancing quite well, and with very promising futures ahead.
So can you explain how you achieve those goals?
So we do so again by building great startups in a de-risked manner with our partnership that ensures we're working on true unmet needs of the market. And those are set by our 4 pharma partners that founded Aion Labs. So it's Teva that we both used to work for. That obviously has a long, rich history in Israel. Merck KGaA out of Germany, that again has a long 50-year history of investing in Israel. But then also Pfizer and AstraZeneca, 2 large global top 5, 10 pharmaceutical companies that this is their first R&D investment in Israel. And all 4 of them came together with a VC, Israel Biotech, then that was later joined by a great high-tech, deep-tech seed VC in Amiti Ventures, as well as Amazon, and they set what the unmet needs are. And then they de-risk the whole process by selecting great scientist founders and working with them to reach their next inflection point on the clinical value chain so that they can actually help the teams build their startups that address true unmet needs, bringing computational technologies into the drug discovery and development process and help them reach their next point of value.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a lot of players from different backgrounds, different investors from different fields. But at the end of the day, you have to choose which companies to support. How does that process work?
So we actually don't have to choose. We actually work with all of our partners, and our startups are able to work with all of them or the ones that are interested in them and their strategic space. So what we did is we developed a model that is based on a great innovation model that was invented in Germany that we brought to Israel together with this German research institute called BioMedX, which was founded by Dr. Christian Tidona. And when we started to build the concept behind what ultimately became Aion Labs, we said we need an innovation model that will help us create deal flow and a new generation of startups that will bring computational technologies and work at the intersection of AI and pharma. And what we decided to do is ask our pharma partners, what are these what-if questions? What are these huge unmet needs that you want solved? And then they invest directly in the startups that we create. They don't have the obligation to invest in each one of the startups, but they have the right to. We never create a startup that doesn't have at least 2 of our partners invested in it. So we have some of our 8 startups that are active here at Aion Labs that work with all 6 partners, 4 pharmas and 2 VCs. And we have some that work with only, quote unquote, 2 of them that might work only with Pfizer and AstraZeneca. Of course, that's a lot for an early stage startup, but some also work with all 6. And then they define specific projects that they're going to do with each of them. And really, it's the pharma supporting the startups and not the opposite. So the startups are bringing value to the big pharma companies because they're addressing and developing technologies that address their unmet needs. And they get to test it out and to see what works and also to see what doesn't work. But the pharmas are providing tremendous value to the startup because they're really acting as an investor and a design partner from day one with a great POC that they can do with the startup within 1 or 2 years of its inception. That's really unparalleled.
I see that from the pharma and bio space here in Israel, that one of the big difficulties that they face after they have some sort of proof of concept, how do they get their foot in the door with big pharma? So you're essentially solving that problem from the get-go.
Correct. That's something we're trying to address. I think when we established Aion Labs, it was a government-led initiative that was led by the Israel Innovation Authority. And they correctly addressed or wanted to address a gap in the value chain that existed here in Israel, which is how do we help, and like you said, Avraham, how do we help connect great innovation from Israel with true market needs that is represented by the pharma companies of the world that were largely not present in Israel with their R&D expertise. And so they said, okay, how do we now build a model that will help to bring the pharmas to be more interested in Israel? And so they put out a tender, and then we developed the concept to address that. And the Pfizer and AstraZeneca R&D teams, together with Merck and Teva, came together and said, this is something we want to do.
Okay. So here, once again, it's the government initiative that prompted the whole.
Correct. They were absolutely the catalyzer. We can talk a lot. I don't know if we have time on this podcast, but we could talk a lot about things government does wrong, or even more specifically, things the Israeli government can do wrong sometimes. But this is something the Israeli government did absolutely correctly. They put out a very smart strategy, identified a huge market failure in Israel, the right strategy to address it, a good tool of incentives to be able to attract interest from global pharma. And hopefully they chose the right winner, but they chose us. So one way or the other, hopefully we'll be able to bring back value to the ecosystem. And that's absolutely one of our missions here, is to help strengthen the ecosystem here.
So let's talk a little bit about your successes. What sort of companies have graduated or come through this program?
Sure. So we launched our operations about 3.5 years ago. And in our venture building processes, we build companies in 2 different tracks. One is in our building track, and the second is in our seeding track. Both work in the same core principles, where we are building a company or helping to build a company that addresses 3 core issues. One is that it's addressing a core unmet need that's been validated by the market that's represented by the pharmas. 2 is that it's a great team of scientists, founders with a technology or a technological concept that can win in the space. And 3 is that we're the right place to incubate them and help them grow. Basically, that means that they have the support, not just from the Aion Labs team, but also from at least one of our pharma partners that's willing to work with them. And in our building track, we've built 6 startups to date. One has even raised their seed round since inception. One we shut down after a year of working with them. And the other 4 are in the process of building their technologies and validating them at this stage. In our seeding track, where we do the opposite, instead of starting with the unmet need, we start with the technology and then bring it to our pharma partners. We've helped spin out 3 different technologies from 3 different leading computational biology labs here in Israel, 2 from Weizmann, the other from Bar Ilan, with significant rounds raised for at least 2 of them, $8 and $9 million, with excellent teams. And they're already working with the pharma partners on POCs and validating their technologies.
So let's talk a little bit about people that work here. You're combining 2 different types of technology that are vastly different. So how does that work? AI on one hand and drug development on the other.
We like to joke that when you bring an engineer or an AI analyst or AI specialist into biology, that if they drop their phone on the floor, it's going to hit the floor. In biology, sometimes you let it go, drop it towards the floor, and it bounces off the walls on the way, and sometimes doesn't even hit the floor, it hits the ceiling, meaning that biology works differently. So we need to help them bridge that gap. And what we do here is we try to find the best scientist founders, and in each one of our teams, they have a multidisciplinary team. So they always have to have people that speak both languages, because there are very few people that speak both in their one mind, right? I have a great CTO and partner, Dr. Yair Benita, and he worked at Compugen, he worked at Merck in the US, he worked at Cytoreason, built their whole scientific operations team before coming over here. He speaks both languages. There are very few like him out there. So alongside him, and his stronger suit is on the computational side, we have a VP of ideation who's really a biologist, Sharon Credo-Russo, and she is really our lead biologist here on our team that has done drug discovery programs and actually developed new molecules. She worked at Biomex, before that at Rosetta Genomics, with a PhD from Weizmann. So we try to build in our team even a multidisciplinary approach, and we like to see that in each one of our startups, that they have AI experts, machine learning experts, as well as top biologists. And we understand that they need to have both elements in that team.
Tell me a little bit about mistakes you've made over the years and how you think that you've learned from them.
So we're talking about life or about work or about Aion Labs?
Well, life we could talk about later after a few beers. So
sure, no problem. Jem's is right downstairs, so we can hang out there. But at work, in Aion Labs, we, just like any startup, we came out, hit the ground running. And I'm a big believer of the enemy of done is perfect. So, I think we both learned that from Chappie Nachumson in the legal department of Teva. That was a big saying that he used to write on the wall there every time we tried to fine-tune and optimize something until it was done. And fortunately, even though I spent 6 years in the military here, we're not dealing with life-saving decisions in building startups and the methodology behind that. The first startup we built, we shut down after a year. It was called Omic AI. It was a learning process for us. I think we learned a lot of what to do and what not to do throughout that process. The founders of Omic AI are 2 excellent entrepreneurs, great people also, really address a lot of what we look for in great founders, and I would absolutely invest in them again. However, they didn't have a biologist on the team. So there were 2 AI experts, developed some of the most cutting-edge AI technologies that are in the cars that we all drive, because they worked at Mobileye for over a decade and really worked at the cutting edge of technology. And they wanted to move back into the comp bio space because they both learned biology and computer sciences before it was called comp bio, and work on very tough challenges that address huge unmet needs that make a positive impact. And that's pretty common, amongst a lot of AI experts. And so they came and built a company with us that was supposed to help predict which drug candidates had a better chance of success, so that pharma companies could actually bet on the right molecules to put into clinical trials in advance. And what we realized there is that they really, with as much expertise as we could provide them with, and as much expertise in the AI world that they had and brought to the table, since they didn't have a biologist on their team from day one, they really didn't speak the language of the customers that were talking with them. And they had conversations with them that they weren't speaking the same language because the customers usually come from more of a bio background in that aspect. So right now, when we build a new team, if they don't have that core element of, if they're in small molecule space, having a computational chemist, or if they're in the antibody space, making sure they actually have a biologist there, we want to make sure that they have that before they hit the ground running. And it could also be a couple biologists that need an AI expert in that space as well. We make sure that they have that before we launch them as a new company and invest in them.
Let's talk a little bit about IP. As you know, I come from the patent department and have experience in IP. What role does IP play in your development of a company or portfolio?
So IP plays a role in the development of a new startup when you actually have an asset that you want to advance towards a clinic. Of course, you have to have an IP strategy around the computational side. And we work closely with IP attorneys, Mark Cohen, that you know, and others if needed. And we have great expertise from our partners, especially from Teva, who has probably one of the best, if not the best IP department in the world. Sharon Hausdorff, a mutual friend of ours, has been here to help advise the companies on how to develop their IP strategy. And it's not just about registering a patent, it's doing it the right way at the right time in a manner that protects your assets at the company. On the computational side, they're much harder to protect. So you don't always want to run out and publish. You want to publish when it adds value to the company. And the computational platform is much harder to defend than patents. So it's really about creating a moat. Sometimes the IP itself on an asset can be the moat itself. And sometimes it actually takes value from the company ultimately because you're giving up some trade secrets that you don't want to give up and publish them.
Right. So then you're going to focus on a different type of IP, which is trade secret, right?
Correct. And I'm not an IP expert, never worked in IP. I'm not an IP patent attorney or an IP expert in that essence. But I think one of the things you learn when you're the chief operations officer for a global legal department is how to pull in the right experts at the right time to consult with them on what the IP strategy should be. And for, as many times as I've consulted on IP, if you're not really an expert in it, don't try to behave like one because it's very complex and the considerations there really require expertise. So that's my one piece of advice in this space is don't assume you're an expert. Consult with the best experts early on and design your IP strategy in a manner that creates value for the company.
I can sign on that too.
Sure. And you are one. You are one of those IP experts.
Thank you. So you have a startup looking for investment in your general field. What kind of tips can you give them?
First of all, go out there. If you are contemplating whether or not you should start pitching or not, it's better to start pitching because practice makes perfect in that essence. And again, the enemy of done is perfect. You're always going to need more capital than you have, especially in the biotech space. And you want to raise capital when you can and not when you need it, right? So those are the ground rules to enter into. Now, you need to tell a very compelling story of how you're addressing an unmet need and how the company that you're building is going to be a huge company that will be very attractive for capital investments. And always try to raise enough money to get you to your next inflection point of value. And a little bit more, not too much more, because you don't want to raise too much money because then you're going to be giving up too much of your company and probably going to be ultimately disappointing your investors. So you're going to want to raise enough money to get you to your next inflection point with some leeway, if possible, added on to that in that essence. And you need to tell that compelling story of how your company is going to be big, how you're addressing a true unmet need, and how the capital that you're raising now is going to get you to the next inflection point and where the value then will be raised to a much larger amount than you're at the moment. So the next step on that journey that you're going to be raising towards. You need to have your pitch down well. You need to come off authentic yet confident that you're the right person to actually pull it off with the right team in place to pull it off. And again, practice makes perfect. So find trusted advisors that you can practice it with and go out and get some real experience, kind of like instead of a dry run, then actual go out and do that and get some feedback and you'll fine tune it as you go along.
That sounds good. So you've probably heard a lot of different pitches and met with a lot of different companies. What do you say the ratio is between the number of companies you've actually invested in or partnered with versus the amount of companies who approach you?
So we've seen candidates, I would say over 1,000 candidates, either in our building track or in our seeding track that have applied, pitched, spoken with us, well over 1,000, and we've made 8 investments. I like to kind of quote a recent stat that I heard from one of our startups that we invested in called Cassidy Bio, still in stealth. And the CTO there was in a very senior role in one of the top tech firms in protein folding, like really one of the trillion-dollar companies leading up all their protein folding. And he surprised me by saying that he heard 100 no's before he heard a yes when he was raising his first round in seed.
So it's about the same ratio.
It's about the same. And his amount of no's was probably that low only because of his background and his partner's background. And really their technology is truly innovative and truly addressing an unmet need. I think in other areas and in other circumstances, it might be 300 to 1. So I think our ratio is relatively similar. And what we like to do is find the best teams with great people. We put a lot of emphasis on the character of the people that we invest in and their resilience capabilities, as well as their menschkeit and the technological concept and the product market fit from day one.
Yeah, menschkeit we need to translate into English though, for our listeners.
It's basically a very strict zero asshole policy.
That works.
That we have here and implement here. Making sure we invest in good people. Like I always like to say, I could teach you how to do anything besides be a good person. That's your mother's role, not mine or father's.
Yeah, that sounds good. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about Israel. Let's talk about what's unique in Israel and that what allows Aion Labs to thrive here.
So Israel, for the biotech ecosystem globally, has a few unique offerings. Number one is we have great research and great healthcare system with data going back decades, but we have a great foundation of academic research in the life sciences space right across the street here at the Weizmann Institute, where we've built 2 companies that stemmed out of. 25% of our companies comes out of computational biology labs across the street, and there's many more to come from my perspective. But it's not just at Weizmann, it's all the way up north in the Technion, all the way south in Beersheba. And we have a great technological capabilities that's really exemplified leadership across the high-tech sectors in every sector besides life sciences and biotech up until now, right? In cyber, defense tech, auto tech, etc. And in addition, in Israel, we've demonstrated the capability to actually work across both fields and converge those 2 fields, which is why the bioconvergence strategy that the Israeli Innovation Authority put out was so smart in that essence, because it said we're great at this, and we're also great at the connection between the 2. And that's really one of the things that is relevant for the future of the industry in Israel, but it's more importantly relevant and will be globally competitive for the global needs of the industry going forward. And that's really what Israel needs to focus on. We need to focus on where we as a country and where we in our capabilities can be competitive in the global ecosystem going forward. So that probably means that some of the things we thought we would be able to do in the past, we're not going to be competitive for. I don't see us building huge manufacturing sites here. I don't see us building huge old school R&D sites. Even the ones that we had are mostly obsolete. What we will be relevant for going towards the future is the capability to work across technology and biology and build great startups, because that's what we're good at. We're not great at research and development. We're great at building startups and that are R&D driven, but not R&D projects in that sense. And that's something that Israel will excel in and is already starting to in this space.
We're still, I guess, about a year and a half into a war. And I want to talk to you about how the war starting October 7th, 2023 has impacted Aion Labs, investment in Israel, drug development, and the like.
So obviously it's impacted. Anyone that says it hasn't, either is dumb or is just not telling the truth. So it's obviously impacted just because A, it's harder to get to Israel and to fly out of Israel. B, less people are coming here as a result of it. So it's, the market's even that much farther. And C, a lot of us, including myself, have been in reserve duty, and it's obviously been very distracting. And we also have to deal with our families and our kids to keep them safe and to make sure that their well-being is okay. So it has impacted. And what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think we're going to come out of this at a much higher value point because we're going to show that true resilience and continue to have really built up great companies in the high-tech sector in general and in this space, in our space of biotech specifically, and really put some life behind that slogan and hashtag of no matter what, because we have actually exemplified that we've been doing this no matter what. We at Aion Labs have built 4 new companies since the war from scratch, and none of them started before October 7th. None of them, actually, the inception of them started before October 7th. We also closed deals to build our first cohort of startups of the first 4 after October 7th, but those already started before October 7th. On October 7th, we were all in shock, right? We all know exactly where we were. We know where our family was, and it took us a few hours to really understand the true magnitude of what was ahead of us. And as someone that does have a little bit of security background, I personally remember the conversations with my family that this is something that's not going to take days, not weeks. It'll be months, if not much longer. Once we're dealing with the amount of hostages that were taken and the magnitude of the destruction that happened, and the complete surprise that we were taken by, I, for one, understood that this was a long-term campaign that we were entering into, and probably a whole new reality, at least for the next year. Now, that being said, on October 8th, I gathered our team and clarified to our team, and then later on to our partners, that 4 things were going to happen. Number 1 is that everyone should take care of themselves. If they need to serve and they're called up, that's a priority. Take care of yourself. We shut down the offices for a week so that people could stay home with their families and not be on the road. There was a lot of uncertainty on the personal security front also. So I said, be with your family. We can work from home. Thankfully, quote unquote, we had COVID not so long ago. So we all remember how to do that and keep, security, our personal security and safety is at the forefront, and anyone that needs to serve should serve. Number 2 is we have a commitment to the companies, the 4 companies that we were already supporting and building. We need to close those deals. We need to support them for success. It's our commitment both to our investors and partners and to the government that supported us, as well as to the startups, and especially to the startups that trusted us to build their companies. Third is that we had an investment committee planned for January, 3 months after October 7th. And we said we need to make sure that happens no matter what. Why? Because if we don't select the next 4 companies that we want to build, then there will be no growth. Then 2024 will be our last year of operations. So we need to build another 4 companies in 2024 no matter what. And we did that. And then number 4 is everything else stops. So it requires absolute focus to be able to execute on building 4 new companies, supporting 4 companies that already were established during a time of a war when some of us, including myself, are juggling reserve duty while juggling our management operations. And thankfully at Aion Labs, we did that. And our story's not unique. We have startups here that, they have employees, top employees, important employees that have spent just as much time in Gaza as they have in Rehovot. And we're seeing this all across the industry in Israel. We don't feel unique. We feel very fortunate that we have the long-term commitment and funding to be able to be operational throughout this whole tough period. And we've had tremendous support, moral support, as well as every other type of support possible from our group of global investors and partners and VCs that have entrusted us to support them on their journey and their needs. I'll say that once October 7th happened, my phone blew up with text messages, emails, phone calls from all over the world, from R&D scientists, from AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Merck, to have on a personal level, and that had been with us for a journey over the previous year and a half. Some had been to Israel. They got to know what Israelis are and who Israelis are and what Israel is. And they reached out, making sure we're okay. They asked us what they could do to support us. And we just said, let's keep operating as we did. But I'll say it was very heartwarming. And we sent out a call. We said, you know what, instead of just texting you back saying we're okay, we created a Zoom call on October 12th. And we said, anyone that wants to get a direct update on how things are going in Israel and what we're doing as Aion Labs to continue to mitigate that risk, but really just how we're doing and show their support can join. I thought we'd be joined by 10, 15 of our partners, maybe our board investment committee. We had 100 representatives from our partners join that call, okay, from all over the world. And just to say we're with you, we support you, and we are not at all taking a step back on our journey in that sense.
Great. That sounds good. So on that optimistic note, I'm going to wrap up. And thank you very much for having me and having this conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Avraham.
Hopefully we'll see each other out on marathon routes or,
I got to get back in better shape, but yeah, I could probably do a half marathon.
Okay.
I don't think I could do the Jerusalem full marathon, but yes. I actually just signed up. I'll give you a small anecdote. I signed up with my 8-year-old son to run a 5K in Tel Aviv for the first time. It'll be his first race.
Great. Yeah, it's a lot of fun doing it with kids. And hoping that your journey continues in the right path as it has been so far. And thanks a lot.
Inshallah. Thank you very much.
That was Mati Gill, the CEO of Aion Labs. We hope you enjoyed this episode. There are many more to come. Do you have a great innovation or startup idea? We'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us by going to our website, jmbdavis.com. And if you go to jmbdavis.com/startup, you'll see we have a special site specifically made for startups to help startups protect their innovations. Please be in touch with us and find out how we can help you. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to bringing you the next episode.